Hi there. Sorry for being the technical fail at the beginning of this really important meeting. Great to be here, and thanks very much for bearing with me. Seems to be the new norm is getting occasionally a couple of technical glitches. Anyway, fantastic to be here, and really nice to hear a bit of a reflection on where NetThing re-emerged from, and it's really rewarding to see that this meeting is happening and that this gathering is taking place, because it is a really vital part of the way in which we should all be looking at the internet, at cyberspace, and increasingly thinking about that kind of broader set of critical technologies that are becoming so intertwined in the backbone architecture and the data that cyberspace and our interactions there produce. And so conversations like this are absolutely vital in making sure that we're all doing our bit to create the right digital environment for our futures. So look, thanks so much for letting me be here at the beginning of NetThing, and just to say again how pleased I am that this event is happening and flourishing, and I'm really excited about seeing everyone in person over the coming year, and also about meeting in person as a group again at some juncture in the near future. And genuinely, there's a sense that it's only through these kinds of dialogues, interactions, and a commitment to listening and learning from each other, whether we be in government, tech sector, industry, academia, or civil society, that we can really protect and realize the benefits of the digital domain. And I think, we meet this year during a time when I think the opportunities are bigger than they've ever been in this environment, but also some of the risks and dangers are more acute than ever. And I think that there's a burden of responsibility on all of us to try and navigate our way through what is an increasingly contested online environment, where geopolitics are increasingly playing out, and again it's that ever more puts more pressure on the task that we have to do. And especially as we look at the way that technology is accelerating at an incredible rate, and in a way that has shown through the COVID period what incredible opportunities our interconnectivity and digital innovation provides us with, and how it assists and drives our economies, assists with sustainable development, and creates greater social benefits. But we need to be really mindful of how we adapt and harness the unprecedented technological change and the disruptions that it's causing, so that we can leverage those opportunities as we re-emerge from the current COVID environment. And that's true of all of our partners around the world. And you'll all be interacting with a whole array of different international stakeholders, and understanding that we all have shared opportunities and risks. And I think we do really have a juncture where there's some significant challenges in the global settings around the values that are, if you like, baked into technology, and the values in which technologies are being absorbed into the global settings. And I think you'll find that in your interactions with your stakeholders. And I think there's some serious questions on that values front that we need to be thinking about for ourselves. And Australia, like all countries around the world, have to manage the opportunities and the challenges incredibly carefully, so that we can keep driving forward and enjoying the benefits that undoubtedly the digital environment provides us with. Look, many of you on this call and at this discussion know who I am, but for those of you who don't, I'm as the Ambassador for Cyber Affairs and Critical Technology. I have the real pleasure of coordinating Australian government's international engagement to achieve a vision for a safe, secure and prosperous Australia, Indo-Pacific, region and world, which is enabled by cyberspace and critical tech. And the role's existence in of itself is really showing the focus and commitment that this government has to these issues in terms of placing them as a top foreign policy priority. And if you need further evidence of that, certainly the fact that my minister, our foreign minister, the Honourable Maurice Payne, launched an international cyber and critical tech engagement strategy in April this year further reinforced that, which included a whole array of new policy developments, financial investments in the work that we do. And the strategy itself, which I'll go into a little bit of detail, outlines a framework for our engagement across the whole spectrum of cyber and critical technology issues. And it outlines very practical ways in which we are going to achieve that, and talks about our work to promote the importance of multi-stakeholderism or a multi-stakeholder approach in order that we can achieve that. And I know online today we'll have a number of you who actively inputted into the strategy, either directly or indirectly, which for me and for the Australian government is incredibly important to ensure that it does have a broad set of voices engaging in that strategy process. So essentially, the strategy, as I've already stated, is focused on producing a safe, secure and prosperous Australia, Indo-Pacific and world enabled by cyberspace and critical technology. And these are, it's key for our future economy and prosperity, to preserving our national security, protecting free and open democracy and ensuring international peace and stability, and protecting our economic, trade and development interests. And it sets out how we will pursue a strategic and coordinated approach to that engagement and try and continue to build the knowledge and capability of our own diplomatic representatives in order that they can engage on these issues successfully. And also how we'll engage with international partners in order to promote and protect those objectives that we want to achieve. And look at creative ways of partnering with other countries and other stakeholders. And as I said, that's not easy in the current context, that we have, increasing competition playing out through cyberspace and critical technologies, which puts more sharp focus on the way in which we're engaging and the kind of resourcing that we put towards it. And the international engagement that we pursue must expand to reflect the increasing interconnectedness between cyberspace and critical technology. We're committed to multilateral cooperation and the support of the international rules-based order to try and help address global challenges. Certainly, we engage incredible amount through, state-based bodies like the UN, through ASEAN, various ASEAN forums, and a whole array of different environments. But also we're cognizant that there's a whole array of other multi-stakeholder bodies that we need to be engaging with. But at its core, we have core principles of which we'll engage, which is, values of human rights, the rule of law, fairness, open competition, security, transparency, respect, and integrity. Our interests are not served by running inwards and letting others shape the global order that is currently under such intense pressure, and particularly when it comes to the structures that we all depend upon, the technical management and governance of the internet, which is why we're all here. The ecosystem of technologies on which the internet depends has evolved over time, and I know everyone who's here today will be entirely cognizant of where the internet has come from, and the fact that the ecosystem is a global issue with implications for us all. The multi-stakeholder system of internet governance being decentralized and having so many different partners who pull it together that place individual, industry, non-commercial interests in governance all on a similar footing is important to retain. I think none of us need to be under any illusion that we're in a very different place, though, than we were historically when we think back to the early days of internet governance emerging as a core theme. If we go back to maybe the mid-90s, might be a good starting point of looking at how that internet governance picture emerged. You know, the internet is a comprehensively different place. So we need to be mindful and practical of the fact that if you have, you know, over half the world's population now online, that's a very different community than it was back in the mid-90s, when there were considerably fewer numbers of people online. And that means necessarily that we do have to be practical in looking at how we manage the internet and ensure that we do protect our citizens online and you know, across their interests, whether it be protecting their security, protecting their freedom of speech and their civil liberties. You know, there's a whole array of interests that we need to protect. And I think, you know, the multi-stakeholder approach to internet governance really does reflect the collaborative origins of that environment, and means that all stakeholders can contribute towards that. And again, that's another reason that we're so keen to support this gathering today. But as I said, there are real threats at the moment to the multi-stakeholder governance mechanisms, and many of you will have heard me say this before. You know, there are a grouping of the authoritarian vision of what the internet should look like is something that is genuinely growing in pace and scale amongst a number of countries, and you know, there's a job of work that we have to do to ensure that we can protect what it is that we want out of the internet, and ensure that we don't take that multi-stakeholder model for granted. And you know, we see that the authoritarian vision is looking to ensure that there is very much more direct state control of the parameters of cyberspace, and restricting our ability to make sure that cyberspace is safe and secure, and doing that in a way that isn't respectful of human rights and civil liberties and freedom of speech. Doesn't come with due oversight and consideration of a whole array of key issues, you know, and you know, we're clear that we don't support that vision, and we work very hard to try and push back on that in the multitude of forums where internet governance takes place. And we do have a commitment to work with the whole array of stakeholders to ensure that this multi-stakeholder model is sustained on the basis of global decision-making for internet governance and technical policy issues, but also still welcoming that discussion on how practically that existing model needs to and will have to evolve over time to ensure that it's fit for purpose with the environment that we found ourselves in. And that's particularly important for our region, where we work incredibly hard to try and assist our partners in engaging with that program of work on internet governance issues through our cyber and critical tech engagement program of work, which assists funding in helping other countries be aware of some of the equities, be able to engage in some of the key forums and technical bodies that shape the internet as we know it. So we're aware that we cannot engage by ourselves. We need to do this in partnership, and we're committed to working with the global community and like-minded democracies to ensure that there's greater security and prosperity in that cyberspace environment. You know, we are aware through the strategy that we need to achieve real-world impact. It's incredibly practically focused. We keep ourselves to account internally and ensure that we're driving the delivery of the strategy, and we did that as soon as it was launched. And we need to be clear on our priorities and indicators that we use to measure success. So, you know, we're evaluating continually how we are progressing against the action items that we've set ourselves. But it's, you know, it's a real privilege to work with a whole array of different innovative thinkers across government. You'll see all different government departments represented in the strategy and what it is we want to achieve, as well as, you know, the multi-stakeholder community. But one of the areas that, you know, we really are working hard on is in that uplift of our diplomatic community to ensure that our network of diplomatic posts around the world are amplifying our efforts, raising awareness of the challenges, and sharing best practice with international decision makers from the Australian experience. To conclude, I think you've heard me kind of state the importance, and maybe that's a good place to start for everyone. Is really just saying we are in a moment of significant focus on the cyber and critical tech environment, and it's vital that we are all clear-eyed that there will be some shifts in the way that the internet is managed. It's how we practically drive that forward and ensure that that cyberspace remains a safe and secure environment for individuals and businesses and governments and all of us to interact in, and also resist the pressure that's coming from authoritarian regimes to comprehensively shift the way in which the internet is governed, because that is going to be a team effort if we're going to be able to comprehensively push back on that. And I think that's almost the task for this gathering and this meeting. This will have to be a whole of nation effort, and it will also require reaching out to international partners to ensure that we are pushing back on these visions of what the future will look like through that authoritarian lens. And it won't just be happening in cyberspace, it will be happening across a whole array of different technologies which are connected and associated with the internet and cyberspace. So if you like, that's your task, that's the homework. It's been a real privilege to be here this morning, and apologies that there were a few technical difficulties in me getting here this morning, but thankfully I got here, and really look forward to interacting with you all over the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Feakin, for sharing your thoughts on the combination of cybersecurity and international relations. It's a fascinating space, and there's so many emerging issues going on in this space, which I think are going to be really impactful going forward. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, which I'd love to throw to you if you're open to it. We've got about 5 minutes before the next session, so let's see how we go. The first question from Mick MW is, like we have witnessed with COP26, it's very difficult to get full international agreement. How can we do better with digital laws internationally?
Thanks, Mick. Thanks for the question. I think the first starting point is always understanding that we're always going to have differences of positions and approaches in terms of, if you like, the global governance frameworks, but it's accepting those differences and trying to find the common ground. And I'll use the reference point of how we worked at the UN, and put aside your sense as listeners where you place the value of the UN discussion, or the way in which we help drive successful outcomes through the two recent processes, a UN group of government experts and the open-ended working group, was by working with those who we knew had differences of opinion, values and positions, and trying to push areas of commonality so that we could get to better outcomes for the majority. And that's not easy. And what you're increasingly seeing in the global internet discussion is a group of middle ground countries who I will tell you they don't want to be positioned into having to choose sides. They want to be able to be working on practical outcomes, and they also want to have their voices heard. So if we ignore, if you like, that middle ground and don't engage with it, even though there may be differences of perspectives at time, then we won't eventuate with, if you like, our vision coming out on top, to be frank. So it's true of all the different arenas you're in. It's accepting that not everything is going to match up perfectly, but going into any negotiation open-minded to try and come out with the best outcome possible for the country. And I think we're genuinely starting to see some successes with that. And also, I think, if you look at something like the ASEAN Regional Forum on cyber issues, the way in which now you see comprehensively those ASEAN states in that organization talking about, international law applying 11 norms of voluntary norms of responsible state behavior. How do we implement those? How do we ensure that we're doing our bit? That is incomprehensible as a position from 4 years ago. There is progress being made, and you're seeing now that I think a broader set of countries are along on this journey and are becoming aware of the risks now. That's not to say that there aren't blips, and that countries won't make decisions which don't align quite with the way we would do things. But I think there's progress now, and you're definitely seeing a greater sense of engagement from a much broader range of countries now.
I have a second question from Vanessa, which is, actually it's just disappeared, I'm sorry. But I might just move to the last question, which is from an anonymous attendee. What can the private sector do to help this whole of nation team effort?
Well, look, thank you, Anonymous, for your question. And I love, oh my goodness, love that question. What can you do? Well, engage as much as you can with government. When you see open call for submissions, please, to whatever extent you can, submit your ideas. I'm always at these kinds of gatherings, please knock on my virtual door and talk to me about what your interests are in what your digital interests are, what you think are important objectives for government. That's vital. We know that the majority of capability and know-how from a kind of innovation point of view comes from the tech sector, from industry, and from various parts of industry. So if we're not harnessing that, then we're not going to be doing as good a job as we can. And if you look at the way in which, whether it be the international engagement strategy, whether it be the 2020 cybersecurity strategy run out of Home Affairs, the consultation processes are extensive for good reason, which is we are all very cognizant that we need not just buy-in, but ideas and also assistance from industry in order to deliver that. Now, in the international setting, that means we need to be getting more and more comfortable in conversations with industry around standard settings. That is a vital part of the work that we're doing. The standards piece is coming under increasing pressure, and we know that there's a whole array of standards bodies where industry leads. We would be incredibly keen for more interaction on that front. The fact that if we could see more industry engagement in bodies like the International Telecommunications Union, that would be fantastic. We appreciate it's difficult. The fact that you often have 3-week-long meetings is difficult to engage with. But we need to see industry more present in those kinds of areas of work. So I think it just comes down to please engage. We are certainly, I think, getting much better at that in government. But also, please just keep knocking on our doors. We want to listen. We want to learn.
Thank you very much for coming to our first NetThing, day one of NetThing, and providing our first keynote. Really appreciate your time and for answering those questions as well. That's unfortunately all the time we've got for this first keynote session, but we have our next session about protecting Australia's critical infrastructure, which I think ties really nicely into a lot of the messages that you were sharing in your keynote. So